behalf of those present, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we now meet. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I also pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia and hope that the path towards reconciliation continues to be shared and embraced. So we have a fantastic program today. First of all, I'd like to thank my team for there's a lot of organisation, coordinating presenters, getting slides ready. My lovely team who've done a lot of behind the scenes work, and you can see them the top of your screen. Luana Spadafora, who is the awards manager, and Danielle Patterson, who is the awards coordinator. And I should mention at this point that our lovely awards manager, Luana Spadafora, will be leaving us at the end of May to take on a new role as a manager in social media at Collards. So she'll be with us for another couple more weeks. In the meantime, we are looking for a replacement. So at this point in time, I would like to thank Luana for all the excellent work she's done over the year. So thanks, Luana. And I'm sure this new role is going to provide you with further growth and opportunity, but you've done a brilliant job while you've been with us. So we'll have to update that picture going forward, but Luana's still on the team, so we'll keep it there. All right, so we move to the next slide. We've got a great little program today. Our focus is on writing a successful teaching award nomination, and we're lucky to have the chair of the awards nomination committee here with us today, Pip Patterson, and I'll introduce her in a moment, who's got a lot of expertise. Will be driving the majority of the session, but then we'll be getting some advice from two of our successful 2023 teaching award recipients, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll talk about the nomination timeline. So to introduce our lovely presenters today, as I said, we've got Pip Patterson. Pip's been in the higher education sector for quite some time. She's actually retired, but I don't believe she's really retired. She says she's retired, but she's always doing other jobs, and this is one of the jobs that she's been doing for the last couple of years, and that is chairing the Teaching Awards Committee. But prior to that, she was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Education at, I believe, at Melbourne Uni and then Sydney Uni, and then moved over to Swinburne for a little while, looking at the student experience. And I think maybe now she's sort of semi-retired. Is that right, Pip, or you still got another role somewhere else?
I have a little portfolio, but I am still retired, and I've just spent the entire day today with my 3-year-old grandchild. So I'm doing the right things now.
Good. That's good to hear, Pip, but great to have you on board. And Pip is a quantitative psychologist and has obviously been leading a number of transformative projects across the education sector. So great to have you on board, and thank you for bringing all that expertise to this session. We also have two lovely invited presenters. We've got Associate Professor Zala Volvic from Monash University, and she was awarded the 2023 Australian University Teacher of the Year Award. We heard Zala speak only about a week ago for the state-based citation ceremony over at RMIT. And what really came out from Zara is her passion around teaching, especially in her work in media studies and intercultural education. She has a real focus on compassionate pedagogy, and that comes through in all of her presentations that I've seen. I'm sure that's going to come through today as well. So it'd be great to hear from Zala as a recipient and the process that she went through in actually achieving the award. And we also have Professor Alexander Mayer from the Australian National University, and he was awarded a 2023 Teaching Excellence Award in the discipline of science. He's been incorporating a lot of problem solving strategies and interdisciplinary approaches into his teaching. And he's changed quite a number of undergraduate, postgraduate programs. So it'd be great to hear from Alexandra as well. So let's move to the next slide, where I'll pass the baton over to Pip, who will start the presentation around, some of the key factors for a successful teaching application. So over to you, Pip.
Thanks so much, Ange, and thank you everyone for being here. I'd really like to thank you all at the start for your interest in the work and, of course, all the great work you do for our students. We see the awards as incredibly important in promoting outstanding teaching, and many applicants mention how important it is collectively to our community of university educators that the awards exist and recognise excellence. So we're really grateful for your interest. On to the next slide, I just want to say a little bit about what a great application looks like. And of course, that's really the key. It is to write a great application. And what we're looking for, I think, is this. It's a coherent story about your teaching, you as an educator, your philosophy, your aspirations for teaching and learning, your approach to reflection and learning, and your achievements. And of course, in the process of explaining that to us, we also want you to address all of the subcategories that are set out in the guidelines for the awards, and with compelling evidence against each of the assessment criteria. So it's not an easy ask at all. And of course, as you do that, the Australian Awards for University Teaching are for sustained excellence. So we're looking for some evidence of sustained commitment and excellence. On to the next slide. If I could summarise the sort of task ahead, I have to say it's not an easy one. It's not an easy ask to do all of that, and of course to do it within the page limit of 8 pages. But a few tips. First of all, and perhaps it's my best advice, is just to get started early. And the second is to actually start with a genuinely open reflection before you begin writing. Previous winners speak of the value of doing this, how useful for their next innovation or their next teaching improvement, for their future promotion applications, for other opportunities, or even for scholarly contributions that they might make. There is just real value in that reflective process. And of course, it takes time, but taking the time is worth it. You and your teaching are worth it. And then if you can get started writing early, so you leave time for editing, both by yourself and for comments and response to colleagues, that of course will improve the application. And of course, many of you will sort of engage in this regular process of reflection on a routine basis. So I'm hoping that part of it's not hard, but it is really worthwhile to sort of sit down and have a big think about your career to date. There's such value in that in any case. And the other thing I wanted to say is just please know how much your colleagues really want to help you. They'll be thrilled if you ask them to have a look at your application, and all we want to see you succeed. On to the next slide. Of course, you need to select a discipline category. These were changed in recent years to align with the ASCED codes, but of course, seek advice from your institutional contact officer if you've got any questions. You may also be in a position to nominate for an early career or a Neville Bonner Award. And again, discuss that with your ICO if you're not sure. In the case of the Neville Bonner Award, we would be very grateful if you could also discuss it with the DVC or PVC Indigenous in your institution, ideally as soon as you can. We make up to 9 awards each year, plus there's a single award for the Australian University Teacher of the Year, and I too am looking forward to hearing from Zala shortly. On to the next slide. I don't need to tell any of you that teaching is actually a very complex professional activity, and what we're asking you to do is describe your teaching excellence, to do it in 8 pages, provide evidence of excellence, and we want you to do that in relation to each of these 4 aspects of teaching, or subcategories as we call them. It's really important to address them all, and an evaluation of your application will be made in relation to each of them. So we really do need to see something on each of those subcategories. Of course, as you can see, they cover the sorts of things you'd expect them to cover. the pedagogical approach you take, and here you can explain your aspirations and your philosophy and your approach, your development of curricular resources or services, your approach to assessment, of course, including the all-important integrity, and the ways in which you've demonstrated leadership or innovation, possibly through impact on peers, but also still, of course, with impacts on learning and the student experience. Next slide. We also ask you to provide evidence of excellence in relation to each subcategory against each of the 4 assessment criteria. I'm sure you're all doing the sums 4 by 4. In other words, you need to address, not in a sort of two-system, it needs to be covered, it doesn't need to be, you know, step by step, but you need to address each of the 4 assessment criteria in relation to each of the subcategories, not in a formulaic way, as I've said, but it's useful to check when you finish that you do have all of the bases covered. You certainly might want to emphasise some criteria for some subcategories. And again, the criteria cover impact on student learning and engagement, markers of recognition by your peers, innovation, and grounding in the scholarly literature. And I particularly mention D, and as I'll probably mention again later, we do find people sometimes overlook that, and it's important that that one's there. On the next slide, and as I've said, there's a lot to cover in 8 pages, and it needs to be a coherent story, and so that's not easy to pull off. At the reflective stage, I suggest you think about the most important messages in each subcategory and then organise the best evidence you can against each of those assessment criteria. I've put a few notes here on what the assessors and panels look for in terms of the assessment criteria, evidence that is consistent, aligned with the narrative, drawn from multiple sources, some of which are relatively independent, and sufficiently comprehensive to give a clear and coherent picture. You'll likely want to play around with it to get it how you want it, but if you start with a clear picture of what you think you need to cover, you can then focus on an authentic narrative to convey the essence of your contribution. On to the next slide. Of course, a good picture is worth 1,000 words, so do use graphs where that makes sense. And we find that people can often be most convincing where they use some sort of numerical summaries, you know, the whole class's response to convey the sort of extent of impact, but also specific reflections of students and peers to convey the character of your impact. That's sort of something, whatever's special about what you're doing and how you're doing it, that's often best captured in more qualitative comments from students and colleagues. But of course, we're looking particularly at the experience of students often. And as I mentioned, don't forget subcategory D. We have noticed that that's often a weaker part of applications. And at least one cycle of feedback from colleagues, I think, will be very helpful. They do tend to bring a fresh eye to the clarity of the narrative, and that's usually incredibly valuable feedback. The next slide, but here's a good example. There's, you know, scholarly, sort of locating an approach in the scholarly literature, providing a graph with some sort of summary data, explaining the data, including a student quote who, you know, explains exactly what the impact on the student was. So it's a much more meaningful kind of message about how the teaching is experienced, extending and relating this to some research, context and narrative, outcomes benchmarked with the school. So yeah, that's a sort of terrific example. And as you can see, very careful attention has been paid to packing that into a relatively small amount of space. So it's a great example, and thank you very much, colleagues, for finding it. That's great. You can see, yeah, there's lots of terrific information, and you know, that picks out the important point I made before, that to the extent that you can get independent evaluations of your work by others, you know, demonstration through awards, or what students have done as a result of the course. These are all great examples of impact. So fantastic. Thank you. And yeah, they do bear studying, those examples and the resources. You also have an opportunity, as well as the 8 pages you write, to provide some supporting materials. The curriculum vitae, 2 reference letters, which are very important. If applying as a team, there's a team statement of contribution. And very importantly these days, I think a video, I think everybody watches the videos, even though they're supporting materials, because it's a great way of getting a sense of you and your teaching and your approach. And sometimes people have a good mix of a little bit from themselves and a little bit from colleagues or students. That also is very helpful. And a photo, which is to be used, I guess, for publication when the awards are finally announced. And you can also include either a website or 10 pages of supporting material in PDF format, if you want to provide more detail. Reference letters, good question, often come from someone senior in the institution, or a senior colleague in your discipline, who might be able to comment on your impact more broadly across the field in which you teach. So it could be that you're having an impact at the institutional level, or it could be that you're having an impact in your discipline. Not to say that you shouldn't have students also write letters, but I think probably there should be at least one from a senior colleague. On to the next slide. Yes, the person could definitely be retired, and I can assure you I write lots of letters. Final things to be aware of. I've probably overused the term coherence a bit today, but panels do spend a lot of time discussing it. It's really important to convince the panel that they have a clear view of what makes you an excellent teacher. Please use the nomination template if you can. It's not essential, but it is very much encouraged, and the assessors do find it very helpful if you do. The process is competitive, of course, so not succeeding is by no means to be taken that you're not an outstanding teacher worthy of winning an award. And so success often comes on a second or later attempt. As I've said throughout, this is not an easy application to write, and feedback can be incredibly helpful. And I think we've often had people win on a second attempt. Please do use the resources on the award website. They really are excellent, and as we can see today, they're getting better all the time. And the advice from past awardees is often especially helpful because they've been through the process that you're about to go through. And one final point, the process for the awards has been honed by the excellent award teams under Angela's leadership over a period of years. So please be assured that the judgments made by the assessors on their panels now achieve a high level of consistency, because what the assessors are being asked to do is very clear and very relevant. And this means that your application will be evaluated carefully and through a reliable process, that the feedback will be considered and reliable, and we hope that the outcomes will be fair. You can certainly be assured of a high level of attention and interest throughout the assessment process, as peers judge peers and contribute to a deep appreciation of your excellent work. And I think all that remains for me to say is very best of luck in writing your applications. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pip. I'm just going to open it up to questions in case anybody online has got any questions for you. It's great to get that insight and the sorts of things that the awards committee look for. So any questions for anyone? I saw there was a few questions on the chat.
Just a quick question. I've been ICO for many years now. I work with the staff that put forward the awards, nominations and stuff. I would like to look at some stage moving into assessing at the national level. Obviously, I'd only start at citations at this stage today because I'm a non-academic. Do you actually have a shadowing program or a program? Because I know every year you are chasing assessors nationally, and it's people are harder and harder to come by, and we know it's a volunteer situation. So I was wondering, is there a way of me joining, but obviously being shadowed by probably a more experienced person beforehand till I'm comfortable to kind of get off the training wheels as such, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so Rebecca, what we do is people put in their application to be an assessor, and you're right, it is it's voluntary. We then make judgments on who we choose to be on the assessment based on where we're getting most of our nominations from, because we don't want people from the same institution assessing an application. Yeah. And then what we do, and we've had professional staff be assessors before, so we have, a staff in staff capability and development, or professional development staff be assessors from different institutions. We offer a workshop like this one on the assessment process that focuses on assessment. Then what we get the assessors to do is to each individually assess. And I think the training comes when we go through the moderation process. So you might assess, and you might be a really harsh assessor, or you have focused on things that are on the matrix, but you've just interpreted them differently. And it's during that moderation process, and that's why that moderation process is really important. It's like you've got, 3 different reviews. Each application would have at least 3 eyes on the application, and you come in and you discuss the application, and you've also got others that you have assessed. So you have a discussion across maybe 6 applications. You get to compare between them, but you also get to have discussions with the other assessors, and that's sort of the training that you'll get. But you'll also get to attend a workshop beforehand if you are selected as an assessor. We don't actually have a shadowing program. It could be something that we think of introducing, but at the moment we have a workshop, and then we ask them to, all the assessors, to individually assess, and then the moderation and that discussion, and that's really important. And we always have a lead person doing the moderation, and that lead person has got experience from previous years. Yeah, so that would be the experienced one. So that's how it sort of works.
I just have a very quick question for Pip. So you showed us a very good example of how we can actually present the evidence in a graphical way. Do you expect to just see one in the main application, or can we just put as many as we think is relevant? I was always having difficulty what to put in the main application and what I put in the supporting documents. So if you could just elaborate a little bit on that, that would be great.
Okay, thanks, Saeed. And yes, it's not an easy judgment, as I've emphasised. And I do think there's definitely no hard and fast rules. You can definitely have more than one graph. And it really, the judgment for you to be making is, what's going to be most important to present that coherent picture of you and your teaching. I think the answer is it's going to depend very much on the detail of the case. But that's why, I think the best advice I gave is to start early, because leaving yourself enough time to actually sort of fine tune exactly what you present and how, it is important because it is such a competitive process. And I think getting some feedback from your peers on that can also be very helpful. Sometimes it's good to write a sort of slightly longer version and then see what you need to cut and sort of really make sure you capture the essence in the final 8 pages. Yeah, I'm sorry if that's not helpful. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's just not an easy thing to answer in the abstract because of the importance of getting the sort of the clear story about you and your great work.
Yeah, can I just add to, reiterate a word that Pip used throughout her presentation is that coherent narrative. And I think that if you start early and you get different eyes looking at it and the narrative is not coming through and doesn't make sense, you can change it. And that might mean that you need to add another graph or another form of evidence, or it might mean you take something out because the reader is losing track of where your narrative is going. So yeah, good advice, Pip.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Angela and Dani and Luana and Pip for this event, for inviting me to share just some of my reflections on the process itself. Can I please say from the beginning that it was so wonderful and incredible privilege to receive this award, because I see it really to celebrate all of us university teachers across the country. And I feel, as university teachers, we educate, of course, but we do so much more. We mentor and guide and inspire and care and help to create stronger sense of intellectual and professional purpose and belonging among our students. And so it's beautiful, to get encouragement, and that there is a really solidarity among us. So really profound thanks. Listening to Pip, I was reminded again how much I benefited from the Australian Awards for University Teaching Archives, guidelines, mentorship. I would the materials were really extremely helpful to me during the process. So it's a wonderful opportunity to say big thanks for that as well. But I have a couple of suggestions that I was thinking about and want to share them. And as Pip was saying, I found the process itself really wonderful because it allowed me to reflect upon my own teaching practice. And I was able to really clearly and in a focused manner come up with my teaching philosophy that really had to be focused, and so I used the opportunity to bring in my own personal background as well, and what drives me as an educator. What were some moments in my life, that helped to shape me, and how these pieces are crucial for me as a teacher in the classroom. So my overall teaching philosophy, I would discuss it with my colleagues and friends. Those dialogues and conversations and their feedback really helped me to crystallize it, then that I could really frame it briefly at the beginning of my application. The second point is that I really addressed all the selection criteria. And of course, we have to and closely follow them. But I did kind of create one particular theme. For me, it was a concept, in a way, a kind of an approach that I connected to all the selection criteria. So very specifically for me, this was a focus on community building and, my notion of compassionate pedagogy. So I explained, what teaching is for me. How teaching, of course, is the transfer of knowledge, but how it's so much more, and how it is about relationships, care, and the sense of community. And what I, as an educator, am doing and was doing to create this sense of intellectual and professional and emotional sense of belonging. So I was quite specific, about this concept. I explained it, conceptualized it, and then linked it very carefully to all the selection criteria. So This might be something, maybe kind of an idea how to structure, your application to help you when you are writing and revisiting your narrative and so on. I also, the third point is that I address this question, why and how my teaching is significant and unique. And I know that we have all been thinking about this and practicing it and being in the classroom all these years, right? But it's really wonderful just to spell it out in a couple of sentences. What is it unique, about you as an educator? And don't be shy and don't be humble. Please say it out. We need to share it. We need to encourage each other and learn from each other in this sense. I use quite extensive both qualitative and quantitative evidence. And I kind of followed 3 layers. I used students' reflections and set use and their statements, also where they are now, for example, my students. Then I focus on my peers. So what my colleagues are saying about my teaching. Was I successful in mentoring, guiding? How, if so? And then also I relied on myself. Self-reflection. How, there are those moments where, they're not, they're not so magic. And then you think, oh, what could I do better, right? And I reflected on that, and then how that carried me through. The fourth one, I think, showing creativity in imagination really pays off. I took the whole application quite, as an artistic project, if I may say so. I was thinking of all the ways that I was creating spaces of intellectual and emotional belonging for students. So, I would think of every little detail or event or moment or phase, and then brought it into the narrative. I have rewritten my narrative, many, many times, but it was helpful to have, just from our teaching histories, this rich data that you could then bring into, right, your narrative. If we go on the next slide, I think Pip mentioned that, and I can't, stress also enough how reaching out for support is crucial. There are so many of us out there. Whoever I reached to were, colleagues are extremely supportive. And for me, Monash Arts faculty, with education designers and data analytics team and arts teaching support team were absolutely wonderful. My own School of Media, Film and Journalism, the colleagues there, reading, talking, supporting, giving feedback, suggestions, having coffee. I think that really, really helped me profoundly. And Monash Education Academy, in my case, Professor Ali Clemens and her team really just mentoring me and guiding me and supporting me in those crucial last moments, where we really have to fine tune our narrative, and also just to plainly tell me what I should be maybe even more stressing or not. And again, AAUT resources, extremely rich and helpful, but those dialogues, and I'm so open here. If any one of you wants, I'm really here for any kind of conversation, to meet and to give feedback and talk about, so that that we don't feel alone. Let me put it this way: there is a whole, community of us, and I greatly benefited from the conversations and feedback and suggestions. So yes, big thanks to everyone. If we can go on, and yes, I'm also going to be building on Pip, and I know, that this has been said, but writing your application really takes time. It's a slow process. You will need attention and focus in fine-tuning it, but please don't stress out. Just every day, if you take a couple, I took a couple of minutes absolutely every day, and that connected me to the narrative, that connected me to all, the data gathering as well, and just making sure that they were clearly connected, to the narrative. So the time, yes, it's just, but then sometimes, it would just happen in the classroom as well, where the moment, those magic moments when we teach and it happens, and then I would be so happy and go and write it down, right? I mean, it's just those moments that so re-energize us. Don't forget, write them down, and put them into the narrative. The next point I want to point out is the importance of drawing on scholarly literature. As we all do, I really read, I really extremely benefit from scholarly literature in education, and of course in my own field, media and cultural studies. I have been reading, then going into the classroom, how to teach, how to educate. And this application process really allowed me to reflect on my own practice, and the scholarly literature I would bring into my application as well. Where what am I building on, and on whose work I'm already drawing on, and then going beyond that, right? So that I think was very helpful. But I'm sorry, I don't want to repeat myself here, but really, to encourage you to address carefully all the criteria so that you follow all the guidelines. I find the application just really clear, extremely well explained. And, we all have data about our teaching. So that, of course, helps. It is a challenge to convincingly demonstrate the relationships, between education activities and then improvement of outcomes for students, but don't give up. There are those moments where you think, really, but go on. I just really think it's an effort, but it's really worth it. And I can already see, how much I benefited from writing the application itself. It's a wonderful process. Then to kind of further and deepen the discussions. Don't forget to make a video. It has to complement your narrative. I was a little bit late, so I was running around the last moment, but loved making it. I reached out to students, and they responded so beautifully as well, and colleagues. Again, it's a testament to the communities that we have out there. And I was so touched, because I think colleagues are so genuinely supportive, and so they're committed teachers themselves. So yes, and I think I have one more slide. Yes, we were talking about graphs already with Pip. I would encourage you to use visuals to back up your narrative. I was quite imaginative, maybe also because I teach visual communication. So I was thinking, I'll go with full force. So I created my own models and graphs and images, also in supplementary materials, so some photos from student groups that we helped to create, and the events that we organized in public spaces. Think of anything that can beautifully visually showcase, your wonderful education. And also, this is kind of more practical advice. Contact your reviewers as soon as possible. Colleagues are, very busy, so I think people really appreciate to have a little bit more time to write the letters. My reviewers were, one was international and one was from Australia, and they really appreciated the time. I had a third reviewer who was too busy, and that's okay, so but make sure that you maybe discuss your reviewers with your mentor as well, and that you just have enough time, basically, to allow your reviewers to write and reflect upon your teaching practice.
Thank you very much. And of course, thank you for preparing that session. And I'm very humbled by being recognized with that award. I equally find myself uncomfortable standing here because I don't feel that I can give you a how-to advice, but I can actually give you, and I think Pip, of course, and Angela's team is much better placed there, but I can give you a perspective on the path I have taken and the obstacles I have observed. So my background is that I'm a biologist, I'm a parasitologist, and parasites come in all shapes and sizes. They range from microscopic, small unicellular organisms to 10-meter long tapeworms. And a parasitologist can be someone working in a hospital, a veterinarian. It could be someone working in the field, someone who's doing actually epidemiological studies. So again, there is this huge diversity in what parasitology actually is. And equally, the student cohort is also very diverse. Not only that, but I also face the challenge that I have courses that are very bespoke, very small, 16 people, and intensive courses, up to big courses, up to 300 people. I am heading a graduate school, do undergraduate teaching, do some professional development for my peers. And again, I tell you all this because that was my biggest challenge, to put all those things into a coherent narrative. That took me the longest time. And I probably wrote 3 or 4 complete different drafts until I had this kind of perspective and that those examples and those analogies that actually resonated beyond that discipline, because of course this is it's not an award for parasitology teaching. It is something that should go beyond the discipline itself. So it's having this common storyline there. Next slide, please. Sala already said that it always takes longer than expected, even if you expect it. Yeah. Unbelievable hours were put into this application, and I'm not complaining here. I'm just saying I realized very quickly that I have to work on the attitude I display towards that application, because there was always other demands on my time, and I had to graft with myself. I saw this as a selfish activity, that this is something for me, and would I not be better off spending that time supporting my students? The trick for me was to make that switch in my head and saying, this is professional development. It's not about the award. It's not about the goal. It's about the journey getting there. And I will learn so much more at that time. And I'm very grateful for the award, and I'm flattered by that recognition. But in the end, I hope it is a tool for me, a tool to be more creative, to have that confidence, to be more creative and convince others that they, in terms of a teaching grant, that they would fund ideas in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is something I realized along the way, talking to lots of other colleagues, and especially in this phase where I drew on the expertise of my colleagues and colleagues outside of the area. It was my writing style, because as someone based in the natural sciences, my papers are always about the evidence. It's always about what I observe. It's never about what I want. It's never about what I feel. And making that switch was extremely hard for me. I think I kind of pulled it off, but that was a constant theme that came back from people who wrote my application saying, well, that's fine, but where is you in there? Yeah, where are your thoughts in there, and not just the evidence there? So that's a science specific one, but nonetheless, I thought that's important to point out. Next slide, please. Link to educational literature. Now, again, I work a little bit different from Sala, I guess. I do not consult educational literature when I plan something. I think about the things, I have an idea, and then it's the point when I go into the literature and has someone done this before, and it's more the refinement stage. Where I draw my inspiration very often from are actually educational sessions at conferences or education conferences, where that gets my juices flowing, and not so much the literature. But of course, there is enormous valuable literature out there, but I use that more as a refinement tool, or as a don't go down that path to prevent dead ends. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my tips here. Ask for help. Ask for different perspectives. It was not a problem in terms of getting my colleagues to get feedback in, providing feedback for the application. It was more finding someone who has other roles, professional staff within the university, who actually bring that perspective in. And I really, once I had that, I felt much more comfortable about it, and it was really very, very valuable lessons to be learned from this different perspective. Qualitative evidence. I was in a fortunate position that out of a previous experiences, I had this collection of quotes already there. And I always tell, that's my mentorship towards younger colleagues, to actually have this ledger. You never know when that comes into handy, because if you have to go back, then it's very hard. And that's also with the plays into role with the quantitative evidence. In hindsight, I had several moments where I thought, oh, I should have asked this, or I should have run that survey. And that's the professional development in the future. I know to do this. It's really clunky to get our student feedback. And of course, I question then, I know that the students give feedback when they are either super happy and or they are very unhappy. What about the ones in between? I was very mindful of that. But I think if you have the right comparison group, then you can actually make some meaningful conclusions from there. I guess that was my 5 cents of worth. And again, thank you so much for providing that opportunity and sharing those perspectives.
Thank you so much, Alex and Zala. And now I'm going to open it up to see if anyone has got any questions for either Zala or Alex. I know that there's been a few questions that appeared on the chat. We have got a number of PD sessions. So today's one was focused on teaching award nominations. Next week, we're looking at writing a successful citation nomination. So those of you that aren't ready to put in a full addressing all 4 criteria, if you're thinking of addressing one, come along to the next one. That'll be run by Liz Johnson. Then we've got one in June around preparing for an early career award nomination. So if you've got less than 5 years of teaching experience, please think about applying for an early career award. We have the Neville Bonner Award nomination. So if you're an Indigenous educator, think about putting one forward for the Neville Bonner Award. And then we've got the Program Award, where we're looking at programs that might span across the university or across a college or across a discipline. And then we'll move into the assessors workshop. So that's pretty much it from me. The next slide will tell us some key dates, which you shouldn't forget. So Preparing the nomination, that's until July. The ICOs will submit the nomination between August and September. October to December, we'll go through our three-stage assessment process. And then in February, we do the final announcement. So it's a fairly long journey. It's pretty much a whole year, and not to mention all the years prior to that where the applicants had to gather their data, formulate their narrative, embed it in the research, show that they're leading in a particular area, gathering both qualitative and quantitative data and putting together a whole application with opportunities to get feedback and advice from their referees or their mentors that they might have. There's a lot of information available. Please feel free to connect with us. Thank you, everybody.